Welcome. Welcome to this edutainment play shop workshop, group commentary and practice with Chris and myself. We're going to cover a couple of elements today that are going to be for the purpose of just offering really supportive tools to people that are interested in learning about attunement and learning about the practice of contemplation and embodied contemplation that can be done for self as well as for other. And we're also offering this as an opportunity for people to get a sense of what it's like to work with us and our processes and programs, and that there is an invitation that we'll share later about a workshop where you can come to meet us and have an experience of some of these teachings in Vernon. And I'll share more about that at the end. But for anybody that's new to us, Chris, I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone. Thanks, Sarah. I'm Chris. So a little background. So I was a heavy duty spiritual seeker in my starting my late teens and 20s. And that spiritual seeking was heavily built out of, in retrospect, a kind of transcendence model. So it was heavily oriented to kind of getting out of pain or getting out of the human condition and transcending into places that were supposedly full of just pure peace and presence and bliss and nothing happening and no time. And then I had all those experiences, and then it turned out it didn't solve that I was still human. I'm still here. And it was all nice when those moments would happen and then they would pass and then what to do. So that led to a whole series of orientations to learn to try to bring that energy down into emotion and sensation and human relationship. And that became the basis of the work that I've been doing for the last, in some ways, 20 plus years, but in the form that it is now, the last 10 plus years. And that's some of that is going to show up for today. So I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. That's how I found Chris, was I was looking for a soul coach, or I didn't realize I was looking for a soul coach, but my soul was like, well, here's Chris. And yeah, my background, primarily I was a practitioner and I was trained as a practitioner in the touch field, massage therapy field. So we're going to be talking about attunement today. Attunement was a really big part of my work and my training in my early life. That was also, I would, now looking back, say, oh, I was looking to get out of the pain, and I thought if I could help other people with their pain, that I could somehow master the experience of pain that I had, or me offering so much, orientation could heal me in some way. And pursued yoga and spiritual disciplines that were very, very much related to that. I'm going to work hard for my healing. I can really like show up for this healing journey and be the smartest one in the healing journey and be the most devoted one in the healing journey and help everybody else. And during the course of that would lead to, it wasn't conscious, but in the back of my mind, looking back at it, I could really see how that showed up. And as life does, I was quite humbled to discover that life has a journey for me that is within me, and my mind can't go there. My mind can't actually understand a lot of that is an intelligence that's within my body. And it wasn't until I was able to take those skill sets of listening to other bodies and start really applying them to myself that I could recognize that the things that were the problem that my practitioner mind was trying to solve were actually the mission. They're actually the intelligence. And I would go so far as to say now, as somebody that identifies as a mystic, and the way I like to describe a mystic is that a mystic, we have five senses and they're facing outward. And as a mystic, your sixth sense is the one that faces in. And so I spend much of my devotion turning towards that and creating as much spaciousness for that deep listening to what's there to expand and to allow me to be shown how to move in the world. And that leads to, and anybody that has kind of gone through this quote unquote like healing journey or awakening journey or this, dark night of the soul might recognize this theme, which is there will be opportunities to renegotiate all of the ways that you have potentially met your needs because you needed to. And that when you can be really specific and spontaneous to what's here, that energy of love and consciousness and erotic force that comes through has the side effect of being healing. It has the side effect of transforming those wounds or those unmet needs. And then that pain really becomes the medicine. That pain really becomes the guide. Um, Depending on how you orient to the word pain or suffering or the elements of what that is, I would say whatever is emerging in this vessel is the guide. And so attunement is one of these techniques where we have been able to apply our experience of many, many, many years of working with people in the physical, spiritual, and the side effect of the mental health side of it, right? The mental health will reflect the physical and the spiritual health. But that from that space, this simple technique and these exercises are so transformative. And it's not chasing the problem. It's not chasing that something's wrong. It's actually creating presence and space for the intelligence to move in the way that the intelligence moves. So we're going to give some lessons today. We're going to teach a bit about attunement. We're going to teach a bit about how attuning to self is a skill set, how we can evolve in the attunement of self and hold attunement to self and others. And you're already probably doing this, but we're going to break it down and help you kind of understand it in more detail. That there is ways of accessing the truth of our desire, and through that truth of our desire and the way that we can support each other in that, we can really expedite the process of awakening and the sweetness and the transparency that's available between humans that maybe just wasn't available to you yet and is now. So really looking forward to practicing this with you and to be able to teach this with people. And why don't we just give people an example of it? We'll do a body scan as a experiential invitation. Take this as a learning, but also take this as an opportunity to be changed by this material. So yeah, I would love for you to lead us in that, Chris.
Sure, thanks. So, attunement is a metaphor drawn from the world of music, like tuning an instrument. So if you've ever been to a symphony or a concert and you just see, they're tuning the guitars and they're playing the strings and listening, and then they're just fiddling a little bit here and there until they get that sound that's like, oh, that's in tune now. And so a big part of starting with attunement then is we're just looking for where the sound is already right. We've all been trained so much to start with what's wrong, as Sarah was saying earlier. And how is this? Oh, this isn't right. This isn't right. Oh, what do we got to do to fix this? But actually, what we're listening for is just the right tone for each person. So I invite everybody, if you feel comfortable, if you like your eyes closed, feel free to let your eyes get heavy and drop, or unless you're driving, in which case don't do that and listen later. But um, assuming you have some time for yourself here and give yourself a moment. Um, Eyes could be closed. If eyes closed is not so helpful, then an unfocused, soft gaze works really well. And the gentle sort of placing of attention inwardly is to look for where there's any place within us that feels peaceful or alive or serene or happy. Or if not any of those, at least like a sort of neutrality. But if you can find somewhere or some place, might be a sensation, might be an emotion, might be both, that feels easeful. And if that's hard to locate internally, if it isn't, if it's easy, then just sink right into it. If it's a little harder, with the kind of soft, unfocused gaze, look around in your environment where you notice there's peace or solidity. There's a bird flying out the window of my place, just gliding around sweetly. Attuning is reminding us that life isn't just out there, that we are life. It's in here, it's out there, it's between us. And life has a really nice tone. And you just listen for that tone, and there's a natural feeling of coming home. So take a nice big breath in, and then just, shake it off.
Thank you. When I kind of first was introduced, so which by the way, Chris was the first one to introduce me to the word attunement. And I remember like being in my bathtub and Fernie and having this voice memo from him. And I'm just remembering it now. And he introduced the word similar to what you're sharing. And and I was like, it can't be that easy. Just like where my mind went to is like, no, I need to work so hard for coming into this like healing or doing the healing or, so much of um, breaking down and digesting the conceptualizations that I had that were, in all earnestness, they were keeping me safe and they were what I was taught to believe I needed in order to feel peace in my body. And, I'll just say 5 years later, that's not true. It really can be this easy, but it is a discipline and a practice to make time for it. And
Mhm.
that practice of choosing to turn towards, like you just did, and choosing to make this space is also part of, this work that I do and you do as well with Gene Keys and the art of contemplation. And contemplation is probably better described as like building the opportunity to transform the alchemy of your life, that space of like, what is here is part of my mission, like I was saying before. But the practice of coming into it as a discipline is the part which I would say is the work. There is some work involved with the slowing down and getting off of that limbic system hijack where it's like, no, the problem is this, and I need to solve the problem that's outside of me, where my, you know, peer disrespected me, or my husband isn't seeing me, or my children need to have this part of their diet altered in order for them to change their behavior. And one of the valuable things about presence and about personal attunement is that as we role model spaciousness and peace and give others the opportunity to be in the presence of that spaciousness and peace, there's a tendency for those problems and that static and those agitations to create their own reorganization with their own intelligence. And that for many is a little bit of a, that journey, like I was saying, like it can't be that easy. And I would say it's not, and it is, but it's that requirement of breaking down the habit of going, I'm too busy, which communicates to another person inadvertently, I don't have time for you. And and at times how this can show up is I don't have this spaciousness for you, but here's a quick solution to solve your problem, which without meaning to communicates that you're the problem or this thing needs to be fixed, as opposed to just deeply listened to and observed. And so one of the really beautiful ways of recognizing the power of our embodied human soul when our soul is lucid and we are fully present. That is a very generous thing to offer the people that love us. And we don't need to have an answer so much as we are able to create a space where the answer emerges from the spontaneous truth of what it is because we're fully present for what is alive. And that also offers fluency of then I can speak transparently of what's true for me. And then you're able to, in the co-creative side of attuning, you're able to hear fully what's true for me. And for many of us, and how this can show up in relationships, again, that we potentially, had as a conditioned behavior, something that didn't feel safe to offer somebody is like, oh no, this will hurt their feelings, or this, won't be able to be held, or, whatever story that we have had in the past, when there's somebody there that fully is present without an agenda, without a need to fix it, that can have this incredible healing and re-establishing of self in a way that, again, you get to see this downstream impact of health and vitality because the channel is flowing. And so much of the way we work with people is to get that channel of openness flowing. And then the problems sort of just fall away. They're not really what you think they are much of the time. So I feel like we should break down a little bit of like, what we just did was attunement. You did actually quite a bit in that little attunement. It was attunement to self, and then it was attunement to environment. And that both can be held as like this scan of my inner landscape. This, when the eyes are closed, I like to say you can turn your eyes towards your inner landscape and really see what's there. And it's a little bit of taking stock is sort of the way I like to look at it, is like really just showing up. I come into this room of myself and I turn on the lights and I go, what's here? And in the past, here's just like a, tip. In the past, what I found was it was like, oh, this is here, but I'm not going to share that. Or this is here, and that's a problem. I need to fix that. Or this is here, and oh, I need to get on the other side of that anxiety or on the other side of that, whatever it is that I was in resistance to. And what I have found is the most helpful is really just to name and to approve of what's here. And then it starts to move. So attunement to self is this practice of like, I am the one that brings my full presence to self and I observe what's here. And as I observe what's here, it begins to change, but it requires my whole presence for me to see it, to name it, and to allow it to move. And then this turning towards self is this other kind of word that I like to use a lot for people, which is containment. So I become the vessel that is hosting what's here. And rather than identifying with it or merging with it, I can be present, and the emotions and the consciousness that here can be present also. So then it immediately starts to transform. So mastery of that practice of attuning to self, I recommend kind of every 3 hours doing a little check-in for this. If you're inclined to want to practice these things, I recommend the Gene Keys app. I set it up so every 3 hours I get a notification of like, how am I doing? What's here? What's new in the inner landscape? It gets easier with regular practice, much like any practice. When you're doing it more consistently, you start to notice, you start to notice if you're breathing apically and you're having a little bit of flighty feelings, or your nervous system is having an experience of overwhelm. That spaciousness is able to be there because I'm clearing the vessel and cleaning the vessel every time I turn towards self. And that opens up the ability for me to hold space for complex challenges or problems that might show up because I'm not pushing down all of the emotions that previously I needed to. So that's a part of this like clearing of the vessel part and of attuning to self. Do you have other parts to add to that? I feel like you do.
No, I love what you're sharing there. Sort of to link it to the earlier metaphor of the music, I think the correct tone is already there to the instrument. And so, yeah, there's sometimes a little bit of fiddling and things have to move and that and the other thing. But when we start with the fundamental assumption of wholeness, like you were saying, this deep approval and welcome, And there's a growing confidence or trust that there's an underlying wisdom and organizing intelligence to life and of our being, then the focus is there primarily. Increasingly, the attention just wants to kind of move to look for that as the really the first thing. And everything else then is in relationship to an organizing, cohesive center. And now it belongs, and now, our branches connected to this tree versus, as you were saying, when there's not first that organizing, cohesive sense of wholeness, then it's like problem, other thing, oh, and they're all separate and fragmented, and where's the center and reactivity. It's like, no, we start to lean to there's a wisdom here. And then that wisdom goes, okay, well, this might need some support, or this needs a little bit of attention right now. But they're not problems. It becomes way more just part of the creative fun and responsibility and empowerment and play than these fragmented moments that are now problems that need solving. Yeah.
Yeah. There's this quote by Thomas More, and it's care of the soul begins with observance of how the soul manifests itself and how it operates. And it's important to start with attunement to self because we are already pretty good at attuning to others and maybe not including self in that parade, right? It's like, oh my gosh, there's all of this big chaos or whatever it is happening in the outer world. But has the vessel been tuned, like you said? And anybody that, is a musician that knows this about the maintenance of a instrument is they tune it before they play it every time. It's not like you tune it once and then it's like it's tuned forever. It doesn't work like that. It actually needs to be tuned because as the environment changes and the humidity in the environment changes or the movement of other vibrations have affected those keys or those strings in that way. And so it's built in that for this instrument to really sing, it needs to be consistently maintained. And the vessel in this way is much like that as well. And so, like you were saying, where we might have this external static, it might actually not be so much that it's an outer world static, it's that the vessel is vibrating and creating that static. And so before we move into attunement to other, which is where we're going next, the practice of attuning to self comes first. And that can be something that is like, a couple of weeks to a couple of months to please, for the rest of your life. This practice will change your life. And it is not difficult, but it does require a small amount of discipline because stepping into I'm holding self and I'm also holding attunement for other seem really juicy to jump into other when that well-entrenched pathway is there. And sometimes that just is slippery and it happens, and that's okay. But where we're going after attunement to other is that I can hold self and other simultaneously and pendulate between the two and then navigate from that space of that consciousness. And where Chris and I collaborate on this and working with people is so often what shows up when I work with women in this program, Oracle Body. They start to learn how to attune to their oracle and how to attune to their vessel and make space for their vessel. And then what's come up is they're like, can you teach my husband this? Because my husband doesn't have presence. And all I'm actually seeking from him is this presence. And every time I try to bring something to him where I'm, PMSing or I'm upset about something, it's like he can't handle it. If he feels like I'm attacking him or something, shows up where there's this static between two people. And so this as a process of doesn't actually matter what the problem is. Most women, and I'll just speak for myself, are seeking to have presence from a man that allows us to have our own experience of containment and allows us to feel safe to deeply drop in. And if you have ever had this experience, as many women have, of I'm too much, I'm too big of an energy for somebody, then likely what that is actually is an indication that you're somewhere along the arc of pulling that energy into yourself, and that we can do that in an interdependent way. And it's a really beautiful way for humans to dance with each other in this, really common languaging that we hear right now about stepping into polarity and how as we step into polarity, there can be a greater experience of opening to life. But there's lots of confusion around sort of what that means. So breaking down attuning to other next is where we're going. And we're going to give a demo of this shortly. Is there anything before we kind of move on to those parts of, what that elements of attunement to other can be?
Well, you'd sent in the notes this definition of attunement that I really loved. Can I share it? Because
Please.
I just think it's so good. And it's rich. It's got, so I'm going to read it through a couple times because there's actually a lot of detail to it. So I'm quoting here. Attunement is the act of deeply sensing, noticing, and resonating with the internal and external cues of another person or oneself. For this moment, let's talk about another. And adjusting accordingly in real time. So I'm going to read that again. Attunement is the act of deeply, notice that word, deeply sensing, noticing, and resonating with the internal and external cues of another person and adjusting accordingly in real time. So that definition is really, I find, very precise, and it's also very expansive in a beautiful way. Like it's its own beautiful contemplation because there's so much in there. But just to say, sensing means that for to be able to sense and then eventually potentially resonate with another person's, for example, emotional experience. To resonate literally means to resound, right? So we're back to vibration and music and physics and so on. So if you're sitting with someone, a partner, family member, a friend, and they're having a tough time and they're sad or they're crying or they're upset, we have to be in touch enough with our own emotional life and our own emotional landscape. In that example, we have to be okay with the fact that we've also experienced sadness and not done a bunch to push away sadness or ooh, I don't want to feel sad or ooh, I don't want to cry or ooh, I don't want to grieve. And then you're in the presence of somebody who's sad or grieving, mourning, and then it will stir up the unprocessed energy, and then it's going to be very hard to be present. Versus if, as you were saying earlier, Sarah, you've gone into the room of your house and welcomed, in this example, sadness. And we know what it's like to be sad, and we know how to be with the experience of being sad. And then someone we care about that we're with is having sorrow, then we can just easily meet them there. We don't have to collapse into it, but we can resonate. We can feel a great degree of empathy and compassion because we know what it feels like to be there. And so the degree to which the self is attuned, and specifically in this way, as we've been sharing of, we're starting with where the health and the wholeness is, and the parts that aren't yet necessarily fully in tune are in relationship to the existing wholeness, to the existing tunement. Then we can be that way for another. We can hold a really big space that is a tone of welcome and a tone of presence and a tone of really deep spaciousness and warmth and care that respects their autonomy, but also respects that they're human like all the rest of us. And that can be a really kind of sweet bubble of care and love that, as you were saying, Sarah, might allow a person because they can feel someone else is holding like a really nice space for them, that they can then figure out what they need to figure out for themselves while somebody else is holding a bit of just presence and real deep witness and is not trying to fix them and is not treating them as a broken doll or fragile or any of this, but just is doing this really beautiful presencing and space holding.
Yeah, this musical theme persists. As you were sharing, I was thinking of how, when you strum a guitar chord in the key of C, if there's another guitar in the room, the key of C will vibrate. That's how this works. And so in that, making that spaciousness for my own emotional experience means that I don't need to caretake your experience. I can experience deep empathy for your experience, and it can stay your experience. And how this shows up sometimes in parenting, I teach a lot around parenting and touch. And one of the things that shows up when I talk to people about this is how often when we're dysregulated because our child is dysregulated, so something shows up and they're having a big kind of emotional experience, a big wave, in our own childhood, if that wave wasn't able to be held by our caretakers, it could be really difficult to hold that wave for our children. And so inadvertently, moving to soothe them as opposed to holding the space for them is actually an attempt to soothe ourselves, where we're not allowing them to go through this whole emotional arc. It's nobody's fault. It just hasn't been something that we've learned as a tool yet. But when we practice this pausing, this self-attunement, this digesting, is really a digesting. It's like snacking on the emotional content of what's here and grazing on it regularly so that it doesn't build up. What that does is it makes it safer for other people to go into that because we are safer. We are safer to share that experience then. And what we're rewarded with is more emotional experience. So just so you know, when you're doing this really well, actually people might become more emotive around you. And so you'll get more and more opportunity to journey with that. And that's a beautiful thing. If you know that that's a gift and you know how incredible it can be, then it can be helpful. And initially, sometimes it could be like, oh my gosh, I've been giving my wife space and she's been just like going off. Just like to say, like, every time there's a yield here that you cannot even imagine how magnificent it is. And it's an incredible gift. And there is some artfulness involved. And that's part of what we teach. There is some artfulness of staying in our own lanes. That is a big part of what we're teaching. So I'm going to give a practice right now that is a little bit of like, all right, let's invite stress into the body scan and see what it could practically look like. So we're just sort of building on the body scan that Chris did. I'm going to offer what's called body mapping. And so again, if you feel like it's safe for you to do so, to close your eyes and to go inward and to offer yourself some spaciousness to integrate our teaching experientially, you might find that you can scan your body and notice that you can access the sensations of your feet. Maybe you can feel the sensations of your feet, where you're sitting, as well as inviting the experience of a breath. So within that, you're observing your inner world of sensation and breath. Doesn't need to be complicated. There's no doing it right or wrong. See if you can, first of all, recognize places where there is health, maybe where you feel calm, maybe where there already is spaciousness in your lungs or around your heart, breathing deeply into your body and inviting that spaciousness becomes recognizable. Vitality becomes acknowledged and observed. And then inviting the space of awareness where you're mapping, and where am I also needing more vitality? Where is there an invitation to bring my awareness towards something that could be inviting me to deeply listen to it? Maybe there's a slight twinge of pain or discomfort somewhere. And you could sit with that and you could be with that awareness of what's there. And so these are physical sensations in the body of replacing thoughts in the mind with sensations in the body. We're going to take this into a degree of the emotional physiology as well. So is there an area in your body where you maybe are feeling some stress or some strain, a place where you experience within your physical landscape concern or agitation? And just noticing that that could be located And then bring your awareness back to the place where you feel a wellness, a vitality, a life force within. And then invite that life force to surround your sensation of stress or resistance. Again, not moving to fix or remove any of the sensation of stress, but allowing the stress to feel the vitality, to feel the spaciousness, to feel the health, and allowing the vitality and the health to wrap around and create a container for the movement of the stress to move as its intelligence is longing to. Through this practice of deeply listening, we are able to reveal that there is something that is drawing my attention inward and is longing to lead me, and it's only inviting that I listen. And coming back to the sensations in the body, trusting that the process of the intelligence of the vitality and the stress are finding their own way. It's enough to show up just for a little bit. And come back to the sensations of your feet on the ground or your seat in the chair, being held by the outer world, and can turn your palms down onto your thighs and open your eyes with your gaze cast down so that you emerge back into the outer world slowly. And so I'm able to allow stress and challenge to hold a space here. And this is important because in these emerging skill sets, as they come in with more fluency, the pattern can be that I need to get rid of the stress in order to show up for what's there. And what we're longing to share with you is that actually that belongs also, that that is part of it. And really all it is an opportunity to turn towards self a little bit and to hold the two. And that way, the transparency of what's here for me can be shared as an invitation where I can invite a greater holding. This is this interdependence skill that humans have in a beautiful way where my stress is mine and I get to work with what's here, but I can also invite that it could be supported by an even greater container of attunement. And this is a beautiful thing that we can do for one another that we're going to move towards in a moment. Parts of this, element of like talking about where we're moving to, this attunement to other. And it's a big part of our teaching around liberated love and working with people that want to work with these energies is that we don't need to impress or perform for the other person. Like, aren't I such a good spiritual practitioner? And look at me doing this great attunement. And then, like, hey, Chris, how am I doing? Am I good at this? And that's okay if that's there. It shows up. We are conditioned to perform in this way for other, and that's wonderful. And it can be this little sort of like pattern that actually isn't as fruitful as the pattern of just like being transparent with what is and staying with what is. And so the stress or the space of resistance is something that as we attune to or invite the attunement of other, that is something that Chris doesn't need to, in this example that we're going to give, change that about me. And if I'm performative or if I'm moving from that space of like wanting to get the gold star, that can be, and it seems like a juicy invitation, right? Where it's like, oh, I want to get the gold star and I want to do good. So just noticing if that shows up, it's okay if it does. We live in a world of a lot of performative spiritual practice. And so, I'd love for you to share a little bit about that sort of performative side that can show up too, or anything you want to go with from there.
Yeah, I was thinking about the your comment of the couples and one in the couple is too big, quote unquote, supposedly, and that there would be maybe potentially a lot of emotion or big energy or thoughts that could be flying around and memories and just to say in this approach, imagine that bigness, whatever that is, emotional venting, whatever it is. And then the point is to create an even bigger circle that then those things have a place to live that is safe for them to be inside of a bubble that is not, you know, gripping and it's not domineering and it's not trying to shut that down. But it's also when that kind of big stuff comes up and it doesn't have a home, it doesn't have a space to be able to breathe and move, but also feel safe within, that's when it can get a little. Used the example earlier of parenting, and I was thinking of the times when I notice my kids like intentionally, I'll watch them like intentionally push to see where the edge of the bubble is. And what they're doing there is they actually want to experience like, oh, there actually is a bubble. They don't want it to be harsh in terms of the comeback of like, no, but they also don't want to push and there's no there. Like that's actually anxiety producing is the like the push and like looking for where the bubble is and then it's not or it's super thin and you can go right through it. That then it's like, I don't know where the edges are. That feels and so when they get the experience of they intentionally will push on it and then it's just like a nice like, yeah, there's a boundary here. You're safe. There's a lot of room to play. Then they go, oh, okay. They go and run around and play some more. And adults do that too. It's not just a thing kids do, although they're usually a little more spontaneous about it. And it's when one can actually really hold enough, and it's okay to notice sometimes like stuff comes up, it's like, you know what, I actually can't do that bubble on that one. That's totally fine too in the art of learning it and practicing it. But to the degree that we can, and we start with some smaller and safer things, and then actually a person get the feeling of like they pushed on the bubble, just like the kid, and it was actually there. And it didn't push them back in a harsh way, but it also didn't just give through and it was like paper mache and they just went right through it. Like you can actually feel like boom, boom, boom. You push on it, the bubble's there, it's safe. Now there's some room to go relax and figure out what a person needs to, while the other person is just, I'm just the big bubble here. And you can push on it, and I'll just be a nice big bubble, and I'm gonna stay solid, and I'll be here.
Yeah. It shows up with animals. This is like the
Yeah.
dog thing as well, where other beta animals will be like, you got me, and they'll be like kind of wrestling or picking at the other, alpha. And the alpha will just have like one look or one pheromone or one body language move where all of the other nervous systems that are attuned to the alpha nervous system can go, okay, it's got us. It's there. It really does create this beautiful peace and coherence. And so it's so helpful to orient to that. That can be showing up in staff. This is a lot of the leadership teaching that I do with people is like when your staff is like testing, are you there? Are these rules real? Can I push on them? If you're getting that testing, then it's not clear where the bubble is. It's not that anybody's at fault, but it's a great opportunity to be like, am I present with the integrity of my being to the situation at hand? And in order to do that, we have to practice this presence. We have to be role modeling it, and then we'll get tested. But being tested isn't, you can take it as a compliment. It's like, oh, they're testing. Am I here? I'm here, and I'm here. I'm here, and that's a beautiful thing. So it's much nicer than why did you leave the socks on the floor again? Or like these things where it's like sometimes we're just like it's not the fight is never about the thing. I swear this. Like the fight is never about the thing. It's often this simple, have you got me? Am I allowed to experience being in the bubble? And where is the edge, like you said? So yeah, it's really beautiful leadership, however you want to offer that leadership, masculine or feminine. It's really just knowing where's the bubble, where's the clarity, who's holding it, and can I allow myself to enjoy the spaciousness of that? So we're going to give a demonstration of what this can look like, but also this is something that I'll pop this exercise in the show notes so that you can practice it. But it's attuning to self, attuning to other, and then holding both. And Chris is going to demonstrate that. So what this can look like when you're practicing this with a friend or another person is turning towards other and gazing into each other's eyes and noticing their breath, sensing what you see in their face, and really deeply observing the presence of that person. And just notice if you're on the receiving end of this, if a part of you gets wiggly and is like, I want to correct, I want to correct what they saw. And, that can be like, I noticed you took a breath and I was like, just like, just be aware of, I didn't take a breath, I was breathing, or, some of these things that can show up as like these are the common things that we see when we're coaching this and working with people. And so it's just the invitation is like, keep staying with your inner process if you're the one that's being observed, staying receptive without needing to alter it or change it, and try to impress the other person, like I was saying, staying connected to self and then receiving when in this experience that I'm gonna be the one that gets to receive what this is like. And sometimes what can show up is these tears or this release that is like, it just feels so good to be deeply listened to or to be deeply seen. And so to notice if that comes alive for you, then maybe you've been hungry for that or longing for that for a very long time. And that it's okay to grieve that you haven't had it in the past and that you're receiving it now, but to stay in that space of receiving and allowing those elements of movement. I like to teach people that tears are the release of cortisol or stress hormones. So they're the body's intelligence of, oh, it feels so good to let go of some of that resistance that I was having. And that as you get better at this, just to name that this can become this wave that happens between two people where you can experience self, you can experience other, you can experience this third thing, which is the consciousness of your two intelligence systems transforming you. And we're in a big time of transformation that humanity is moving through. And these are some of the tools that allow that transformation to really be beheld as the beauty of what it is. And I would argue that all of our stress, all of our outer world static is actually this impulse saying, can I be beheld? Can I be safe to transform? Can I slow down to the pace of my soul deeply coming into my body? And that's so much of what happens when we deeply gaze into each other's eyes is that recognition. Oh, right, this is what we came here for, and this is actually what life is about. And that's the thing that I've been hungry for. And so to harvest that yield. So I'm going to stop talking and I'll let you kind of move into that demonstrative part.
Okie dokie. Thank you. So I just wanted to say that notice that Sarah's been saying self and other repeatedly through the episode. And I just want to say through our talk here, which is that order is intentional. It's something she said, but I just really want to underline it as a general statement, but also specifically for what's about to happen, because it's in that order intentionally, self and other. So what I'm going to be doing is being the big bubble, is setting up the really big bubble, and then she'll have her experience of what starts to happen inside of the bubble that I'm helping to generate. And then within that, I'm just going to say what I'm noticing of her being in a very, as we've been saying, warm, appreciative space. And this is where the self and other and staying in touch with self and not losing oneself while being with and for another becomes really important, because it could be too easy to go into either fixer mode, as we were saying earlier, like big emotions, and it's like, okay, well, stop this, and okay, we can fix this. Or another possible thing that can happen is people don't do that move and then they start to become really open and present and very aware and are setting up the bubble. And then beautiful things start emerging in the other being. And they might feel a little like they're about to merge with or lose themselves because, like, wow, look at how, especially if we're talking like partner practice or where there might be romantic or some chemistry together, be like, whoa, whoa, that can be a little bit of a force field or a tractor beam. And that can lead to the other person becoming a projection screen for they're there to fulfill my needs, which they are not. So neither are we treating them as a broken doll that needs to be fixed, nor are they becoming, our muse or something where they exist for us rather than the whole point of this process is they get to actually experience the safety of actually getting to experience deeply what is real for them while being held. And the holding allows a person to go when it's safe and strong and the bubble's really there and intact, then they can go inwardly and maybe be able to sense and feel and connect to some of the parts of themselves that might be harder to access otherwise. So the self and other maintains throughout. So I'll be doing my best to practice holding the bubble, observing and noticing and naming without getting pulled in, but staying in the same kind of warm, connected, but maintaining myself while being in connection with. So that's a little bit of the art and the fun. And it's okay to experience a whoops, fell over the line there. That's all part of it too. It's just learning and play. So with that, I shall become present and quiet for a few moments to set up the bubble. Hmm. Again, this requires me first being in touch with myself and rooted and centered and grounded in myself in order to then shift into a mode that's in this deeply present and observing, but with warmth and care mode. And I can see Sarah's starting to move into that, and there's a little back and forth, and that's okay. That's normal, that's part of it. So I'll just focus a little more on making sure the bubble's extra strong. There. So she's settled a little bit more. And there's no rush and there's no force. All I'm focusing on now is staying connected to myself and feeling that I'm this big bubble. And that has the natural tendency without forcing it, should she choose to do so. She's a free, sovereign being. She happens to be relaxing into it. It's her choice. It's an invitation. People can RSVP or not. It's their choice. So I notice her breathing deepening as her eyes close. And as she was saying earlier, that's an invitation to go inward. And I don't need to know, nor could I claim to know the various things going on inwardly in her experience right now. But I just watch the cues, as we said earlier. Oh, there's a smile. Again, not performative, but that was natural and organic. And would have also been okay if it was a frown or any other kind of facial gesture that would have been appropriate. And little movements or body shakes or emotion coming out is all part of it. If the container is really, really strong, and I'll just emphasize that the bubble now feels very, very kind of sweet and sort of pink-ish to me. And it can take on different hues and colors as you practice more, depending on the needs of the person. And so this is her process, and I'm not here to solve it or fix it for her. I'm just saying that she's safe, she's held, she's really cared about, and I really see her. And for the person who might be undergoing such an experience, they don't necessarily have to know why all this stuff is coming up. Sarah's very good at not having to create story around things. She's really amazing at just being willing to be with what's arising, including little tears. So sometimes stuff will come up, a giggle, a laugh, a tear, some anger, feelings of longing, some tenderness, some vitality, some joy, some hilarity. Any and everything is, and it can shift like the waves in the ocean. And I don't have to spend as much time worrying, okay, well, what is this one about? And what's that one about? Where does that come from? And blah, blah, blah. And just learn to surf these waves. I'm not doing the surfing for her, but it is a little easier, relatively speaking, when someone else is holding the big space for her. So she can just focus on that and know that I got the rest. Hmm. As you work with a process like this, Sarah's very masterful and she came right out of it. But I would recommend, generally speaking, that usually they need, if they've gone deeply, it's like really slowed time to return to the more normal state of consciousness and just kind of honor that that was a process and a moment that has a beginning, a middle, and a right closure to it. So it just helps us, particularly as we're starting out, to learn that it's okay, like there's a time here, and to really honor that as sacred. And I'm profoundly grateful that, Sarah, you let me hold that space for you and trust me that way. It's really beautiful to behold.
You wouldn't have been able to hear me, but there was like these kind of sighs and these moans and this, yeah, this really like, actually, I'm gonna just kind of go through it all because I get to relive it in the sharing, but I also feel like it'd be really helpful for people just to name what the experience was for me. And so, like initially, I mean, we're sharing this, and so I can, I'm aware that people are going to be watching it. And so there is a part that I meet initially of like, all right, I'm like landing in myself. And there is a performative part that wants to be like, do this well, just it comes for it, and that's okay. So I was just like being with that. And then for me, initially, when I experienced like that energy from Chris, which is wrapping around me, it almost feels a little bit like a, is this okay? There's almost like an asking of self of like, is this okay? Can I soften? And almost, I like to call it like this sort of sweet shame or the sweet humility, where there's like a little bit of embarrassment that comes forward of like, oh yeah, this feels really good. And I'm sort of embarrassed and turned on at the same time. And Chris and I work together and we're friends. So that energy of like, being erotic or experiencing eroticism can kind of feel like, oh, this is really sweet. I'm like a little bit embarrassed right now that my nipples are like getting aroused and my body is tingling and I can really feel my body say yes. And so I like uh, it's really juicy as a woman to be able to have that experience. And it can be a little bit confusing at times of like, oh, what's gonna happen? So like allowing that to be the journey and allowing that to be a layer of the journey where that erotic energy can be there, but there is actually a deeper softening layer underneath it. And that's where I started to have that tear and that meltiness. I like to describe it as meltiness because that's what it feels like. It's like I almost wanted to fall over. Like it was just this, and it was a good thing that there's arms on my chair because my body wanted to just deeply sink into that. And so I sat back in my chair and I allowed that to be the case. Um, and I was listening for Chris to lead me to the depth that I was also saying yes to. So there was like me intentionally choosing and willingly, it's not passive. Like a lot of the time where I was confused for years was sort of this like, all right, you just lead me and I'll just get like kind of like resigned in some way. It's not. There's a choice in this showing up. And in that choice, I'm also listening to that experience where I can feel him offering a deepening, and I can say yes to that, or I can say, at this time, that feels plenty to me. And sometimes we might feel like, oh, I just want to digest all of this. But you might be going to pick up the kids at school right away, or you might be going into a meeting. And so this can be done where it's like a mini practice that it's so clarifying. And I'm able to really feel more connected to my body than I could with my own attunement. So it's a lovely cooperative thing to offer. It doesn't matter who's the man or the woman. You can both choose who's going to play space holder and leader and who's going to play the one who's receiving and turning their gaze into their inner experience. And that's another really beautiful, freedom to have however you organize your energies in the yang, or in the yin, that it's a choice to move in that way. Um, But the beauty of it, and this is why it's like so precious to include in this, is I get to get in touch with my desire body and the truth of my desire body. And what shows up there is something that I like to advocate for women to get to know really, really well, is the truth behind their desire body. And in that, there's a bit of a journey that we're going to talk about now, which is this practice that we also will be offering people, which is like understanding the voice of desire from the head and the voice of desire from the heart, and then the voice of desire from the hoo-ha, because I just like the way head, heart, and hoo-ha goes. But what I'm speaking about in hoo-ha is this heart womb, or this like low belly ache. And that longing and that ache at times can be this experience of like, oh, I don't want to carry this. And I would like to offer that there's a there's a world that we live in right now which needs women to be able to access their deep desires and to offer those to the world. Because from that space, it's often like, I want to help children with this, or I want to bring this artfulness into the world, or I want to create a community related to, this element. And that is our soul speaking through the fulfillment of our soul's journey. And to make a space for those voices to speak, we often talk about our desires from our head. I'll give some kind of demoed examples of it in a second, but that can be like, I want to manifest this much money, or I want to, go into this outer world experience of self. Often that's from the voice of the head. And then sometimes we give ourselves permission to really connect that voice of the head to the heart. And then it's like this impassioned voice, which has an emotional charge behind it. And you know when you've heard somebody speak their desires that are their thoughts with the emotional charge behind them, you listen. All of a sudden, it it's something that we're looking for. The world is hungry for that level of desire and authenticity. And when it comes through, it catches people's attention in a really beautiful way. But nothing like when it comes from the lower energies and when they're aligned in that it's magnificent to see a woman or anybody speaking from that deep level of themselves. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just connect to part of the desire, and I'm going to speak from these different voices, and then Chris is going to echo it back to me. Do you want to use your own language, or do you want to say it like you heard me say it?
As much as possible, I want to reflect back
Okay.
your language.
Okay. There's a lot of desires in there. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna share the desire that I have from my head. I want to offer my son a new way of education in this world.
Thank you for sharing that. It's really beautiful. What I heard was that you want to offer your son a new way of him being educated in this world. And I heard that, if I may speak, it's your mind space. I heard the clarity and the precision of that articulation.
Mm,
Hmm.
thank you. To the affirming that he just did there, what was really beautiful about that was like right away I was like, oh, that gives me permission to feel it more now. So then like right away my heart has more, and I feel this like passion coming forward. So I'm gonna speak the same message from that space. I am longing to offer my son an experience of learning that I never got.
I heard the longing of and the desire to give your son an experience and a way of learning that you never got. And I can really hear I can hear the ache, I can hear the tenderness of the not got for you part, but I can also hear the passion and the fire of the longing that is there. And it's a really, yeah, it's such a sweet one.
It's so funny to me how great it feels to like have acknowledgement of desires. It's such a simple thing, but it's just like, ah, thank you. All right. So this might just take me a second because there's like a bit of a process, and I'm aware of like this, like there's a part of me that's still in the performative. So I'm just gonna allow myself to move in this
Mm.
way. I believe I was born to offer a new education system that has never been experienced in this world.
Mm. Wow. I heard a deep intuition in your being that you're here to offer a new way of educating that hasn't been. And I felt you like leaned into the camera when you said it. I could feel like, oh, there it is. There's some force behind that. And Your son's very blessed and he chose really well when he chose you to be his mom.
Thank you. I want to just share with everybody that's listening or watching. When I dropped down into that and then like was able to speak from that space, for me, the energy went down. And then to have it received, it felt like this, like these wings around my back, which were like holding me in that. There's like
Mhm.
energy came up my back and wrapped around me. And then I was like, I want to drop into this more. I could go lower. This is also what happens is like when we have this freedom for the energy to move, we become more
Mhm.
playful, it becomes more light, and there's this sweetness that happens where those desires now they feel achievable. Now they're not so much a strategy session as a like, this is what justice is in my experience. And that's a different journey altogether, and one this world is needing more and more of, in my opinion. Oh, so lovely. So I really hope that throughout the course of this we're going to wrap up and yeah, just like share with people. I hope that during the course of this, you took the opportunity to harvest like some of these practices. And if you didn't and you just went through them on a kind of cursory experience of it, great job. You made it to the end. I would encourage you to go back and really like have the time and space to practice those individual ones and then also play with another person. So play with a friend or play with your partner and allow yourself to experience it and then maybe be like, oh, that didn't go well. And please, the invitation is to reach out to us. You don't need to book working with us in order to share some of your experience or comment and ask questions because there's like a lot of connection that comes from listening to something and then following that like you got tuned, you just got tuned by Chris and Sarah, and so the magic of whatever that is we don't know, and we're not going to profess to kind of prescribe what that is, but the invitation is reach out. We've got a couple of opportunities, one of them being a workshop for couples or individuals that want to practice this journey of the yin arc. So we just gave like a small percentage of what that could look like for attuning a woman to the process of her journey in her body. But we're offering a workshop that is the process of a yin journey in the orgasmic experience or the experience of ecstasy of embodiment in a yin body or a feminine body. And this is important at this time. We both kind of recognize that this is showing up for us in the groups of people that we're working with because we have been for a very long time living in a world which is organized around the process of the yang and sort of this performative outward journey of sexuality being, whether it's influenced by pornography or if it's influenced by just following the processes of like, this is what I thought that the process was in making love and having sex. And I don't know why I'm not fulfilled, but I'm not. And we would like to offer, you might not know that the process for a man when he comes to orgasm is the end of his arc. But for a woman, when she comes to orgasm, it's really the beginning of her arc. And that there's this entire long opportunity for more and more filling and fulfilling that leads to a really rich life. And that might not be penetrative sex, it might be, but there's actually so much more that's available. So if you haven't checked out our other little episodes of Liberated Love, you can check on my website, goldenguidance.online, and follow Chris on Substack. He's got many episodes help people practice and learn more of the mapping of all of this mystical awakening journey that we're within. And if nobody listens to this at all, I still feel, whew, that was a great use of my time. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much.
Oh,
It's beautiful.
my honor. Thank you. It's, yeah. If I could highlight one point you said there in your really beautiful sharing about your experience there when we did the space holding and you went within, you said, and I just want to really highlight it so it's not lost. You said it's not passive, it's not resignation. It is going inward, it is melting, it is surrendery, it is a receptive yin state of being, but it is not passive. And I think that's hugely important to emphasize.
Yeah, thank you. It is because there is some valor involved in this, yins, however I like to say yins instead of ladies, but and as you were saying that, that was great because I got to reflect on that part and you saying that. But one of the things that I feel like sometimes women that I work with don't understand is the perspective from the masculine or the space holder or the one that's playing the role of the yang or the container. Can you share a little bit about like what that's feels like for you to be able to offer that? Because in the past, I was under the assumption of I was like asking too much, or I was like, oh, I'm like taking up too much space, or you're a busy man and you got other things that you're doing, and I need to hurry this up, in some way. So like I would love for you to reflect like what shows up for you in that experience.
Mhm. There's a performative, like you had your version as you shared of thank you for asking, performative arc, and there's one that's like, oh, my camera, oh, we're gonna put this on thing. Oh, I better be a good meditator. I spent all these years. I better be able, I said I was gonna do these things. I better be able to deliver, fine. That's part of it, whatever. Just a minimal amount, but sure, it's there. We can just laugh at it. But really, for me, in this arc of being influenced by the yin and changing to a yin orientation in this whole realm is to learn how much gifting it's been for me to be changed in this way, to go from the yang energy being okay, like there's an agenda and there must be an outcome and there must be a goal, and did I reach the goal, or no, I got rejected, and oh, did I achieve, did I succeed, oh, I feel like a failure, or whatever, that whole unpleasant journey to the yang energy is still outward and it's directive, but now it's become this way. And that if I trust to stay in my seat more and make it go out and around and really just like, is it the version of your earlier statement? Is it actually this easy? Is it actually this simple? It should be more complicated than this. My head thinks. To really learn to trust, like, no, actually, it's okay for me to stay centered and then be this big bubble and then just watch and witness and then take in awe. And that is really a remarkable shift. So that's really the arc, is learning, for me, was learning that the how to mature that energy so it wasn't like this, but like this. And then the amazing gifts. And then, as you're saying, this whole other arc from a yin point of view, like, oh wow, there's a whole this, as you're saying, the story's just actually starting, not we're not at the end. This is just actually the beginning. And I didn't know there were all these extra chapters and amazing potential scenes and scenarios and revelations to reveal themselves. So that's been a huge change.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that part. These gifts that we get to offer each other. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I look forward to hearing from everyone. Thanks for having the courage to reach out. Please share this with all your friends that you feel might be meaningful. I would argue that we don't have any problems in the world. We actually just need more love. And it's here. We just get to slow down to listen to it more often. So thanks for deeply listening. And we look forward to hearing more.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody. Thank you.